During the early Apollo years, NASA scientists and engineers anticipated the need for a vehicle to aid the astronauts in exploring the moon. It was expected that bulky spacesuits, limited life supplies, and other inherent weaknesses would decrease man's mobility on the lunar surface. In 1964, with conceptual design of the Mobile Laboratory, or MOLAB, NASA began research on lunar surface vehicles. Over the next few years, an entire spectrum of vehicles was designed and studied. From these efforts came the knowledge that contributed directly to the development of the lunar roving vehicle. Its development required solution of many challenging technical problems for which there were no precedents in terrestrial vehicle design and operation. For example, the lack of an atmosphere on the moon, the extremes of surface temperatures, plus or minus 250 degrees Fahrenheit, the very weak gravity, 1/6 of Earth's, and the many unknowns associated with the lunar soil and topography. All these factors imposed severe and unique requirements on the LRV. The first manned landing on the moon, Apollo 11, and subsequent missions confirmed the long-recognized need for a lunar vehicle, a vehicle which would allow astronauts to cover more area, to conserve energy and life support materials, to transport additional equipment, and to return with more lunar soil samples. For even before these practical demonstrations, in May of 1969, NASA decided to proceed with the design and development of a lunar roving vehicle. The LRV would be a two-man, four-wheeled vehicle, 10 feet 2 inches long, 44 inches high, with a 7.5-foot wheelbase, weighing 460 pounds Earth weight, and capable of carrying a total payload of 1,080 pounds. The LRV would have 5 major systems: mobility, cruise station, navigation, power, and thermal control. The mobility system, which must be able to cross 12-inch high obstacles and 28-inch diameter craters, consists of the wheels, traction drive, suspension, steering, and drive control electronics. The system was designed, developed, and tested by General Motors. The first assemblies were put through development tests to measure strength, deflection, endurance, and other factors. For example, driven on a rolling road fixture, the wheel assembly was tested under Earth conditions, and later in test chambers reproducing the environmental conditions of the moon. The LRV tires are made of a woven mesh of zinc-coated piano wire, to which titanium threads are riveted in a chevron pattern to keep the wheels from sinking into the soft lunar soil. Long-duration torture testing on this so-called carousel, simulating the lunar surface, verified the durability of the wheel design. The test assembly was supported by springs to relieve most of its weight, thus simulating the 1/6 gravity of the moon. A mobility test unit was used in early phases of development to validate the LRV mobility system. The astronauts participated, as they did in all aspects of LRV development. Two 36-volt silver zinc batteries provide the vehicle's power. Each wheel is individually powered by a 1/4 horsepower electric motor. A highly efficient harmonic drive system, originally developed by the U.S. Shoe Machinery Corporation for other purposes, is used with each motor, eliminating the need for a transmission and its gears. The suspension consists of a damper or shock absorber supported by triangular arms that pass the suspension loads to torsion bars. Other systems were also being developed. For example, a simple navigation system, which would allow astronauts to drive beyond sight of the lunar module and yet be able to return to it by the most direct route. The system works by recording direction and distance traveled from a starting point. In order to assure the proper physical relationship or interface between the vehicle and the astronauts in their pressurized spacesuits, several so-called cruise station reviews were conducted. First in normal Earth gravity conditions, and later in simulated 1/6 G. The LRV's cruise station consists of the control and display console, seats and seat belts, armrests, footrests, hand controls, door panels, and fenders. For other cruise station reviews and development testing, an LRV mock-up was installed in a mechanical brake system. A major milestone in the Lunar Roving Vehicle Development Program was delivery by General Motors of the 1G trainer vehicle to be used for astronaut training. Though heavier and stronger than an actual moon rover, since the crew and equipment weigh 6 times more on Earth, the trainer was practically identical in size, shape, and handling characteristics. One simple difference was the use of ordinary pneumatic rubber tires because of the extra weight of the vehicle.
So I don't know how many of you have heard of this guy named Elon Musk, but he's been in the news a lot lately for some reason. Just opened this Giga factory in Texas, and it's the biggest factory in the world, apparently, and that's pretty crazy. They threw quite a little party. The Giga Rodeo, complete with rhinestone cowgirls on roller skates, and all kinds of fun stuff. To me, it kind of looked like Burning Man moved to, Cyberdyne Systems factory. But marketing, it's all about the marketing, right? And that's kind of what Elon Musk himself really is. And it became more apparent than ever in a recent podcast interview that he did a couple weeks ago as well. And he talked about a lot of things. But to me, it made it more clear than ever what this Elon Musk character, and that's precisely what I believe he is ultimately, the role that he has been tapped to play, the many roles, but this Tony Stark, in real life kind of baloney. But with all this stuff about Twitter, him buying Twitter and free speech and the bots and everything, they asked him directly, what about turning Twitter into something like WeChat? And this was Elon Musk's response, and this pretty much tells you exactly what he's all about in the end.
Sure. Well, for those that have used WeChat, I think WeChat's actually a good model. If you're in China, it's basically, you kind of live on WeChat. It does everything. It's sort of like Twitter plus PayPal plus a whole bunch of other things, and all roll into one with actually a great interface, and it's really an excellent app. And we don't have anything like that outside of China. So I think such an app would be really useful, and just like the utility of it, of sort of a spam-free thing where you can make comments, you can post videos, you can. I think it's important for content creators to have a revenue share. Now this does not need to be done on Twitter. It could be done from something that's created from scratch. So it could be something new. So really, but I think this thing needs to exist, whether it is converting Twitter to be the sort of like kind of all-encompassing app that, like I said, everything from digital town square where important ideas are debated, maximally trusted and inclusive, and at a point where you sort of have a high trust situation, then payments, whether it's crypto or fiat, can make a lot of sense. We just want something that's incredibly useful and that people love using. But it's either convert Twitter to that or start something new. Those are the two. But it does need to happen somehow.
On the one hand, I really don't need any more reasons to distrust or dislike or pretty much just ignore anything that Elon Musk says, and that's kind of what I normally do. But I'd made myself sit and watch this entire podcast interview because just so that I'm not trying to take things out of context, and I want to know like what is the pitch, what is the whole thing, and it just makes me more and more convinced of like how his whole persona is kind of this. Well, he's the aloof kind of does whatever he's the maverick, How ironic that stupid sequel movie is coming out now too. But anyways, he's the billionaire who plays by his own rules, and he makes all the right people mad. Bill Gates, and he's kind of the people's hero in whatever way. And there's several things in this stood out as to obviously the voting. Oh, he might vote Republican. Whoo, and but also calling things out like, oh yeah, inflation is not because of the war or anything, it's because you printed a bunch of fiat currency and diluted the money supply. It's like not exactly bombshell news to any of us, but in the mainstream, it's like, yeah, nobody ever can say that. So there's all these little tidbits that I can see why conservative people who've just been railroaded, and deplatformed and all this stuff for the last 2 years, I can see why many of these points that he has would be appealing, and that's kind of the whole point. Just like with Trump, like a lot of his talking points were what people were hoping to hear, but was he really genuine? But WeChat, forget about killing monkeys because we put chips in their brains, or wanting to put a chip in your brain, or wanting to merge with AI, because if you can't beat them, join them. These are all things that Elon has said in the past. Not to mention, it's all about exploring space and occupy Mars and colonize the solar system, but at the same time, the whole thing could be a giant computer simulation, or most likely is. There's like a 1 in a billion chance that we're in the base reality, or whatever that nonsense is. So yeah, he's all in on all the crazy scientism. So, making an app like WeChat probably sounds really boring by comparison, and really like, so what? But the main difference, I would say, is that unlike all these other things that are either abstract or, in the future, or still speculative, or just complete nonsense and fakery, WeChat really exists. It's not some quantum computing based kind of thing. It's just one app that they use in China that does like 10 different things. And, this whole social credit system that we've been talking about for several years, this exists. The Chinese social credit system is not some idea. It is a reality, and shown exactly how it can be used in a totalitarian technocratic sense for the world to see. And here he is openly talking about what a great app it is. And this is, I guess what I'm trying to say is, this is actually one of the most horrifying things that Elon Musk has ever publicly said, I would say. This shows what the whole purpose of the Twitter buyout really is to either destroy Twitter, because it's like, oh, there's too many bots, and so he pulls out, and then it just kind of implodes because nobody wants it anymore, and then he builds his own from scratch, which they could just as easily do, or you turn Twitter into WeChat. But either way, it's like, oh yeah, the PayPal guy, the AI guy, it's ridiculous. This is their pitch man to pitch the free West an idea that we should be absolutely 100% opposed to. But of course, it's the same thing with Tesla and these electric cars. And what is the real agenda and point behind that? Is it really about the environment? Or is it about, having a machine that is totally under the control of the manufacturers and the technocrats who can turn it off and monitor everywhere you go, track and trace, autopilot, have a computer? It's just, I hate talking about these things because they make me so angry just to think that people want to build them and do them. But, I'm a crazy Bible-thumping Luddite, so who cares what I think? Doesn't want to merge with artificial intelligence. And it's weird because I just found this old NASA film, Spacecraft with Wheels, about the LRV, the lunar rover, developed, that had some good R&D prototypes, right? But I mean, I never really thought about it being kind of a promotional venue for electric vehicles. That they had two silver zinc batteries and an electric motor for each wheel, and a navigation system. Interesting, like they really needed a navigation system in case they went out of sight of the lunar module, which I'm pretty sure they never did. In fact, they just kind of drove back and forth. It was the most pointless thing ever, and complete stagecraft, obviously. But it's not without a purpose. I mean, obviously, on the one hand, it's just there's a lot of free government contract money going out to GM and all these different industries that participated. But it's more than just that. This is all meant to be seen and consumed by the masses. And like, what? A car without a gearbox? No transmission? No engine? They had made electric cars many, many decades before this, but still, marketing. It's about marketing. Marketing the technocracy. And that's what Mr. Musk is all about, one way or another. Whether you think he's super smart genius of a guy, or just a total line-reading puppet, MK Ultra, robot or whatever, kind of makes no difference to me in the end, because it's undeniable what he is here to promote and to lead, as a prophet of scientism, lead people into this fourth industrial revolution.
I wanted to ask when you all think we're going to move from this form factor to something that's on your face, glasses, and when computing's all on the edge.
All right, 50 seconds. Who wants to answer quickly?
I think it will
go. It will, first of all, it will definitely happen. I was talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030. I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
And I'm reminded of a number of videos I did on Elon Musk in the years past. It's been a while since I've done one, so maybe it'd be a good time to do a recap on some of that. But I've noticed that even in the alternative media, the truth community, whatever you want to call it, there's a tendency to kind of look at him as being some sort of an outsider and not a part of, you know, the whole cabal, and debating over, you know, whether his mom is his handler and stuff like this. But for me, it's kind of straightforward in terms of being part of an absolute, like, out in the open secret society, if you will. When he joined the Royal Society, so he's an official member of the Royal Society, which is one of the oldest societies, I would say, that has been at work in the modern world anyways. And to me, it's like he might as well be a Freemason after signing the grimoire, which was his word for it, when he signed the Royal Society book. I mean, yeah, that's Elon, right? He's always making a joke out of stuff that's like, what? And there's also the time where he tweeted about, you know, breaking through the crown chakra, and he shared the meditation aid video that helped him to do it. And so, yeah, this is somebody who's not locked into materialistic, anti-spiritualism, you know, science. This is like the essence of, you know, quantum mysticism, or whatever you want to call it. And the reason I bring that up is because I was doing some more reading and research recently about Jewish mysticism, quote unquote, pertaining to the Kabbalah and what is known as Merkaba mysticism. And many of you are going to be very familiar with Merkaba because many of you have come out of the New Age and similar occult practices and know all about the flower of life and all this stuff. And we've been talking about that for many years. But going back to the Merkaba, you have Merkaba literature and Heckalot literature, which are kind of taken together in a lot of ways because they're interrelated. And Merkaba means chariot, basically. Even right here on faulty Wikipedia, Merkaba or Merkava mysticism, i.e. chariot mysticism, is a school of early Jewish mysticism, 100 BCE to 1000 CE, centered on visions such as those found in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 1, or in the Heckalot literature, and Heckalot means palaces, so that's the palaces literature, concerning stories of ascents to the heavenly places and the throne of God. The main corpus of the Merkaba literature was composed in the period 200 to 700 CE, although later references to the chariot tradition can also be found in the literature of the Hasidi Ashkenaz in the Middle Ages. So yeah, the Ashkenazi Hasidic traditions, where Kabbalah basically wasn't limited to, but it was a major, you know, that's where a lot of the Kabbalistic development happened in that region, in that, yeah. And so without reading all of that, basically, yeah, they take the vision of Ezekiel and his chariot and the wheels within wheels that anyone who's read the Bible is familiar with. And you probably heard plenty of New Agers and such try and point to Ezekiel's vision as one of the prime examples of a mystical experience or of a, you know, a spirit journey. And so during the Second Temple period is kind of when the first batch of writings in this vein seemed to start to kind of circulate. And then they were, of course, developed further over the generations and over the centuries by different rabbis. And, of course, Merkaba is not, just like Kabbalah, it's not universally embraced by all of Judaism. So let's make sure that we do emphasize that point, that this is not like, this is what, is being secretly taught in every synagogue. It's not. But the point is that it's a very old body of teaching and body of literature that is considered that a lot of times just gets lumped in as Dead Sea Scrolls, essentially. And the Dead Sea Scroll topic is a whole nother, rabbit hole that I don't have time to go into now. But basically, it's kind of floating around, and they mention, things like I think Second Enoch is where Metatron is mentioned, but a lot of these writings mention Metatron, and you can find all kinds of stuff on the internet and YouTube now talking about Metatron and Merkaba mysticism and showing you how to do it and teaching you what it's all about. So it's not really much of a mystery anymore. It's out there. So I feel like at this point, kind of to not talk about it as Christians is kind of more just pretending that this isn't something that is going on now, to where, I mean, like I have a friend who learned how to astral project, from a book before, he came back to Christ, and, learned firsthand, like, how real these experiences are and how demonic it all really is. And so that's the point, is that even somebody like Elon Musk is promoting that side of things on top of all this other massive corporate, technocratic nonsense. And the reason I'm bringing up this Merkaba and Heckelot mystical literature and tradition is that it ties into the question that I've been kind of pondering since first coming across enclosed cosmology and thinking about history and the development of all these astronomical theories and projects and stuff. Is like the question of like, well, when did people first start contemplating the idea of planets being something that you could go to? That they're another world, not just a light in the sky, because obviously people were charting the wandering stars since Babylon or whatever, and it's all about astrology and the different houses, and that ties into kind of the idea of palaces and things like that. But where did the idea of like physically going to them, when did that really begin? Was that like the Jules Verne era, when they were writing about civilizations on the moon and Mars and stuff like that, and speculating? I mean, that was well into the 1800s, but the furthest back that I've found so far is writings that go into like the 12th and 13th century, where they're talking about the planets and talking about them as being, places where you could actually go and visit. And that ties in with the science fiction story, one of the first science fiction stories that I mentioned in a previous video about going to the moon with the help of the demons. And so that was like in the 1600s, but 12th and 13th century, at least, they were talking about interplanetary travel in the mystical sense. So really what you're talking about is interdimensional travel. And so it keeps coming back to this, to where if you realize that there would be an exoteric understanding of space and the solar system and Copernican, of science in general, just materialistic science and Darwinism and everything like that, it's on the base level, it's aimed directly at the Bible and delegitimizing the Bible, disproving the Bible, making the Bible just silly nonsense in the eyes of science, because science has proven that, so it's very mechanical and materialistic, and just, everything is just energy and particles and random interactions of matter and energy. But then at the same time, the idolatry of man isn't going to be satisfied with materialism. But then predating all of that is this different idea of ascension and evolution and monistic, pantheism, basically, that hasn't gone away. It's older than materialism, it's older than quote-unquote science, and yet it's all baked in. And as time goes on, it just becomes more and more apparent of why these topics of scientism are just so crucial from just a basic Christian understanding, living in the times that we do. If you don't really understand like how we are deceived and seduced by narratives that can come through avenues that don't even seem religious or spiritual or, new age or whatever, but they can be presented in terms that are just completely pragmatic about business, technology, economics, and whatnot. And Elon Musk is really stepping into this crazy role. And I'm not saying he's the Antichrist or anything like that, but he's definitely shilling for the beast system, at the very least. So, I pray that he finds Jesus and can be set free from that. But that, of course, ultimately would rely on him. But essentially, this Merkaba meditation, oddly enough, is we're meditating on the sacred geometry, literally like imagining it around your body, and you create this light body, and then of course it has to do with the breathing and all that. And even like certain Kundalini guru types have explained that it's more or less just like Kundalini, it's just kind of using a different approach. But at the end of the day, you're just inviting demonic energy into your being, into your body, and into your mind, in order to basically create a light body, create a spaceship, an interdimensional spaceship that you can travel through. And it's weird how we just keep seeing more and more, and I've talked about this in the past with movies like Contact, Jodie Foster, where she goes through the wormhole. And I was watching a thing just the other night of Leonard Susskind. He gave a talk at the what was it? He was talking all about wormholes and the Einstein-Rosen bridge and all this stuff. I mean, a lot of groundwork has been laid for a lot of years to take all these old concepts that all first existed in the mystery schools and then basically validate them through mathematical theory and science and such. And that gets into, quantum physics and all that. I'm not trying to get into quantum physics again right now, but wheels within wheels, this chariot. So the idea is that they take Ezekiel's vision as kind of the base scripture, because it really is scripture. That Ezekiel really had his vision, but what the Bible describes and what they do is completely different. To where the wheels within wheels are like the spiraling energy, vortexes that's created by this superimposing of, two tetrahedrons, this Metatron's cube thing that you've all seen a million times. If you see Metatron's cube and you think spaceship, then at least that's maybe what I'm hoping people will take away. That's essentially what this concept, it's essentially what that symbol is for. You becoming the spaceship. And of course it involves the names of God and all kinds of other blasphemous things. And hopefully this is obvious why this is so wicked and dangerous, because you really can go into other spiritual realms and dimensions and experiences and encounter quote-unquote higher spiritual beings. And this is very, very real. And it's been going on throughout all of history. But just like the Trojan horse of driving your own car it's basically got all the amenities of a spaceship or kit from Knight Rider, all this programming that we've been receiving for generations of TV and movies and NASA and all the rest, selling us on technology that's promising to empower you and to raise your virtue, in terms of look what I'm doing for the environment. And, make it cool, make it flashy and modern. All of that just to seduce you into giving over more and more of your autonomy and your privacy. And, ultimately, embracing we're all nodes in this big complex of people and machines, right? Embracing the Matrix or whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing spiritually with mysticism in the New Age, although I would argue probably even more dangerous and deadly. And so hopefully that makes sense. Because again, you can kind of fall into deception in sort of two directions, or there's two ways to fall off a horse or whatever. We have Christians that are just so bought into the knowledge of this world and the knowledge that humanity has amassed over centuries and all of our space agencies and Royal Society and National Geographic and whatever, all these things that people are still putting faith and trust in, all these institutional things, right? And essentially just turning more and more to the wisdom of man and the things that we can build with our hands rather than the power of God and his spiritual authority over all the world, right? And relying on him instead of every new thing that the world has to offer. And so it's a very deistic kind of neutered Christianity, I would argue. That refuses to see how all these technologies could be used for really, really evil ends. And then on the other hand, you've got all these folks that are very aware of all these physical seductions, all this technocratic propaganda, right? To just get you to put a computer in, your house, your car, your brain, whatever, it's all good. And they're like, no, that's, they see right through that. But then the appeal and the seduction of gnosis on a spiritual, mystical level, or even just trying to find spiritual meaning and purpose in their life, but then still getting seduced into some kind of pantheistic monism or anything that is a distortion of just the gospel as the Bible reveals it. And so those are kind of the two worlds of tension and striving that I feel like I'm kind of constantly bouncing back and forth between. I'm sure many of you do too, whether it's family and friends and different people who are coming at it from all these different angles. And, some people might think talking about Merkaba mysticism in relation to NASA is just the most bonkers thing, But then other people that will think that makes sense. But then when you're talking about the Bible is the most bonkers thing. And so whatever, you're gonna don't pursue the truth and don't pursue following Jesus if you have hang-ups about people thinking you're bonkers, because you're going to have problems, particularly when it comes to being a disciple of Jesus, I would say. But that's also what's so freeing, I think, about being able to just walk through all this stuff in the light of Scripture and the Spirit of truth that's with us. And, showing us these things, and we don't really have to worry about what men and women think, especially when they're. I mean, Elon Musk, simulation theory, dude. I mean, think about like how goofy that is. So he could be really, really smart in terms of business deals and stuff. But if you think that all of human experience is ultimately just a video game being played by some 13-year-old alien in their parents' basement, then that's a worldview that could basically allow you to kind of do whatever in the end. There's really not a lot of that's not fearing God, because why would you care about freedom of speech or human rights or anything if we're all just like algorithms in some alien computer, or we're all why are you even seeking godhood if you're entertaining that idea? Why are you even seeking enlightenment and all this stuff? It's a fractalized, fragmented worldview in the end. And it's appropriate that we're seeing more of this stuff coming out in like Marvel movies and stuff, the multiverse of madness and all this. These are concepts that are becoming like normalized and regurgitated through archetypes in movies and entertainment and stuff. There's this I saw this Prime Video series about what's it called, The Night Sky. The dude from the Farmers Insurance commercials and Sissy Spacek from Carrie. And they have this like room in their basement that teleports them to like another planet, and I don't know, I didn't watch it, but it's the similar ideas just keep coming back again and again in science fiction. This idea of teleporting, but then I think at the end it's like, oh, is that really another planet, or is it just like the future Earth or something like that? So again, it's about portals through time and space, and people becoming fascinated with concepts that have been around a long, long time, but now are being portrayed in a quote-unquote modern way.
This will be a slow process where we will gradually increase the issues that we solve until ultimately we can do a full brain-machine interface. Yeah, this is going to sound pretty weird, but achieve a sort of symbiosis with artificial intelligence. But I think with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, I think we can actually go along for the ride. And we can effectively have the option of merging with AI. This is extremely important.
I think we talk about AI being potentially the last invention that we have. I think that high-bandwidth BMI might be like really the first invention in many ways of like the next chapter of
And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.
And then the interface to the chip is wireless. So you have no wires poking out of your head. Very, very important. So it basically Bluetooths to your phone. But we'll have to watch the App Store updates for that. Make sure we don't have a driver issue.
And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
And we hope to have this aspirationally in a human patient before the end of next year. This is not far.
If you look at that, you might think that looks pretty messy and it's not clear what's going on. But I'm going to do a little trick. I'm going to take those neurons and I'm going to rearrange them so that they're in the order of the tuning that they have, but just as I told you about those two neurons. And if you do that, look what happens. Now suddenly structure emerges. And I think you'll agree, looking at that there's information in that stack of neurons that tells you about the movement. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to do that kind of magic in an automated way to read out the movement. The way we do that is by building something that we call decoding algorithms. These are mathematical algorithms that we tune based on data like these to be able to take in just those rasters of spiking activity and output the movement that the person wants to. for these little fake data, I built a very, very simple decoder, and sure enough, it's able to capture the intent. This is what we want to do on a bigger scale. That even if you're not actually making the movement, even if you're just thinking about the movement, or even if you're watching someone else make movement, the cells in motor cortex respond in a similar way. With that, we think that people will be able to get naturalistic control over the computers, not just a mouse, but also a keyboard, game controllers, and potentially other devices. That's what we're trying to do.
We developed this robot that can rapidly and precisely insert hundreds of individual threads representing thousands of distinct electrodes into the cortex in less than an hour. This tool allows a surgeon to aim between the blood vessels that cover the surface of the brain with micron-scale precision. Here the robot is selecting individual electrode threads and placing them into the brain in the pre-planned location with remarkable accuracy and repeatability.
Since the start of Neuralink, we've gone through 3 major revisions to the analog pixel, progressively improving both the size and power while maintaining performance. And our latest pixel on the right is at least 5 times smaller than the known state-of-the-art of similar architecture with 1 pixel dedicated per electrode as published in the academic literature. All of these functionalities that I outlined are integrated into a single 4x5 millimeter silicon die.
This is in fact traces of a bunch of electrodes that came off of one of our devices, a bunch of electrodes with a single thread. And each trace shows you a voltage waveform in time as it's coming off of one of those threads. We have algorithms that can detect these spikes in real time as they're happening. And that allows us to collect data